Whispers in the Dark, a horror sleep story. Part 1, The Arrival. The town of Greyhaven was always quiet, even in the middle of the day. Streets curled like forgotten veins, buildings leaning slightly as though whispering secrets to one another. When Mara arrived, the air felt thick, almost heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. She had come to visit her grandmother's old house, a sprawling Victorian structure on the outskirts, abandoned since her grandmother passed years ago. As she stepped from the car, the gravel crunched beneath her boots. The house loomed above her, its windows dark, like hollow eyes watching her approach. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes, soft, distant murmurs she couldn't identify. Her heart quickened, but a part of her felt drawn. There was something magnetic about the house, like it was waiting. The door creaked as she pushed it open, a sound sharp against the otherwise still air. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight, motes drifting like tiny ghosts. The smell of old wood and mildew rose to meet her, heavy and ancient. As Mara stepped inside, the door swung shut behind her with a thud that echoed through the empty halls, a final punctuation marking her entrance. She moved slowly, her flashlight sweeping over faded wallpaper, the peeling edges revealing a time long forgotten. The air was colder here than outside, unnaturally so, and the shadows seemed to shift at the corner of her vision. Each creak of the floorboards sounded amplified, like footsteps following just behind her. She told herself it was only the house settling, only her imagination, but the whispers persisted. "Help me." Mara froze. The voice was faint, barely audible, like it came from the walls themselves. She spun around, flashlight trembling in her hand, but the hallway remained empty. Her rational mind told her she imagined it, that grief and isolation had begun to play tricks. But then the whisper came again, clearer, almost urgent. "Please don't stay." Her chest tightened. She wanted to run, to escape into the fading light of day, but her curiosity, her grandmother's voice in her memories, pushed her forward. Mara ascended the staircase, each step a soft groan under her weight. The air grew colder, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of rust or blood. She paused at the top, her flashlight catching movement at the end of the hall, a shadow, longer than it should be, stretching and twisting in ways that defied logic. The shadow flickered and vanished when she blinked. Her heartbeat raced, echoing in her ears. She took a tentative step forward, then another, drawn to a room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and the whispering grew louder, now forming words she could almost understand. "You're here, finally." Mara's fingers pressed against the cold doorknob. The moment she pushed it open, the darkness inside seemed to inhale her light, swallowing the room in black. Her flashlight flickered and died, leaving her in near total darkness, save for the dim outline of a rocking chair swaying slowly. Though the room was empty, from somewhere deep within the house, laughter rang out soft, high-pitched, and impossibly close. Mara turned in a slow circle, searching, feeling eyes crawling across her skin. Then she saw it. Faint scratches on the walls, forming words she could barely read in the dim outline. Don't sleep. Don't wake. Her body wanted to run, but her legs refused to obey. A cold, whispering wind brushed against her cheek, carrying voices from nowhere, chanting her name over and over. Shadows began to stretch from the corners, pooling toward her, thick and oily, crawling along the floor, creeping under the door, moving like they had a life of their own. Mara's flashlight flickered back to life briefly, revealing a figure in the rocking chair. Its face was obscured, but she could feel it looking at her. Slowly, impossibly slowly, it lifted its head, and she glimpsed hollow eyes that seemed to pierce into her soul. The whispering intensified, voices now overlapping in a chaotic symphony of sorrow and anger. And then the floor beneath her groaned, as if the house itself was warning her to leave, or perhaps warning her it wouldn't let her. Mara's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet her body remained frozen in place, trapped by the darkness, by the voices, by the house itself. Above the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. Soft, almost gentle, but dripping with a cold menace. You can't leave, not tonight. The shadows inched closer, pooling like thick liquid, their edges writhing. Mara's hands clutched the flashlight, the beam slicing weakly through the black, catching brief glimpses of shapes, hands, faces, eyes writhing and pressing against the walls from the inside. Her heartbeat was deafening in her ears as panic clawed at her mind. And then she heard it, the soft, unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, echoing across the floorboards. Not human, something else. Something patient. Mara's lips parted, a silent scream forming, but the shadows began to merge, curling around her legs, climbing, pulling, whispering endlessly. You belong here, forever. She stumbled back, the door behind her slamming shut on its own, trapping her in the suffocating darkness. The rocking chair creaked once, twice, and then the figure in it rose, slowly, impossibly, stretching beyond the ceiling, whispering words that burned into her mind. Sleep, or you'll never wake. Mara's world faded into blackness as the whispers grew louder, surrounding her completely, drowning her senses. The house was alive, watching, hungry, waiting. Part 2, The Shadows Speak. Mara's eyes snapped open, but the darkness had not lifted. The rocking chair was gone, yet the room felt heavier, alive in a way that made her chest tighten. The whispers persisted, now closer, circling her, filling every corner of the room with words that made no sense, but made her skin crawl. Her flashlight flickered weakly, revealing the walls. They were no longer smooth, they rippled, as if the house itself were breathing. Shapes formed in the shadows, faces with hollow eyes, mouths moving silently, reaching out with fingers that curled and twisted in impossible ways. Mara's throat tightened, and a shiver ran down her spine as the whispers escalated into a chorus of sorrow and rage. She forced herself to move, stepping backward toward the hallway. Every step felt like wading through a thick, invisible substance. The air was alive, pulsating, filled with cold hands brushing against her skin, unseen but insistent. She glanced at the stairs leading down. They seemed to stretch unnaturally, lengthening into darkness that shouldn't exist. The whispers began to form words, phrases, fragmented but chilling. They are watching. The door is not a door. You cannot leave. Mara's breath came in short, ragged bursts. Her mind screamed for reason. There must be a logical explanation, but logic faltered in the oppressive darkness. She turned the flashlight toward the hallway, and the beam caught movement. A figure, barely more than a shadow, drifted at the end, tall, thin, with empty eyes that seemed to pierce through her very being. Mara stumbled backward, her hand slamming against the wall, feeling the wallpaper shift under her touch. It rippled like liquid, revealing scratches that formed words she hadn't noticed before. We are many, we are waiting. A sudden coldness enveloped her, pressing in from all sides. She could hear something moving behind her, slow footsteps that did not match the rhythm of her own. Her flashlight flickered violently, and for a brief second, she saw dozens of faces pressed against the walls, mouths opening and closing, whispering her name, screaming silently, their eyes black voids of endless hunger. "Stop," she whispered, though she had no idea who or what she was speaking to. From the far corner of the room, a faint light appeared, small but unwavering. It was a lantern, ancient and flickering, swinging gently in the air, though no one held it. The whispers turned into a low moan, a lament that reverberated through the floorboards and into her bones. Mara's feet moved almost on their own toward the light, drawn by a strange, magnetic pull. The closer she got, the more the whispers twisted into coherent sentences. Follow or be lost forever. The lantern seemed to beckon, casting long shadows that writhed like living creatures. Mara's heart pounded, but she felt compelled to move forward. She reached the lantern, and as her fingers brushed the handle, the world shifted. The walls melted into darkness, the ceiling disappeared, and she found herself standing in a vast, shadowed hall that extended beyond the limits of sight. Figures moved in the periphery, flickering between visibility and nothingness. Some wore tattered clothing of decades past, their faces contorted in silent screams. Others were formless, shadows that curled around the edges of the hall, whispering endlessly. Mara tried to step back, but the floor beneath her seemed to dissolve, replaced by a void that pulsed with malevolent energy. The lantern floated ahead, guiding her deeper into the endless hall. She realized, with mounting terror, that the house had changed. It was no longer a place of wood and brick, but a living labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The whispering reached a crescendo, voices overlapping in maddening harmony. You are ours. You cannot leave. Stay. Her body trembled. Mara could feel the cold tendrils of the shadows brushing against her, caressing and pinching in equal measure, making her skin crawl. The lantern's light flickered, revealing a staircase spiraling upward into an endless void. Desperation seized her. She wanted to run, to scream, to escape this nightmare. But something deeper, more primal, held her in place. A voice, soft yet commanding, cut through the chaos. "Do not fear us, child. Fear only yourself." Mara's mind spun. She turned, searching for the source, but all she saw were shadows, countless forms blending into one another, whispering, waiting. The lantern floated higher, and she realized the stairs were calling her. Each step upward promised a fragile hope, yet the whispers clawed at her mind, warning that every step could lead her further into the dark. She took the first step, her foot trembling. The darkness seemed to shift, stretching and bending, forming grotesque shapes with every movement. Faces emerged, shrieking silently, reaching for her as she climbed. The air thickened with the scent of decay, the metallic tang of something long dead, something hungry. With every step, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. "Sleep, sleep, stay." Mara's body shook, her mind teetering on the edge of terror and exhaustion. The lantern flickered again, casting brief glimpses of a room at the top of the staircase. She could barely make out a doorway, its edges glowing faintly, promising either salvation or something far worse. Tears streaked her face as she climbed, each step a battle against the oppressive darkness. The shadows reached, curling around her ankles, fingers brushing her skin, whispering words that were impossible to forget. "You will never wake, not tonight, not ever." She reached the top of the staircase, gasping, trembling. The lantern hovered before the doorway, swaying gently. Beyond it, she saw nothing but blackness deeper than night, a void that seemed to swallow sound itself. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she forced herself forward, stepping through the doorway into the unknown, guided only by the lantern's flickering glow. The shadows surged behind her, writhing, whispering, never letting go. And as the door closed behind her, the voices rose in a chorus that chilled her very soul. "Welcome, you are ours now." Part 3. The Heart of the House. Mara's feet touched the cold, smooth floor of the room beyond the doorway. The lantern hovered before her, swaying gently, casting wavering shadows that stretched impossibly far. The air was thicker here, heavier, and carried a low hum, almost like a heartbeat, but one that didn't belong to her. She realized with a shiver that it was the house itself, alive in ways no living thing should be. The shadows followed her, crawling along the edges of the walls, their whispers forming words she almost understood. "You cannot leave, you belong here." Her hand shook as she reached for the lantern. Its glow brightened for a moment, revealing the room. A vast hall with walls of polished black stone, reflecting the shadows back at her. Faces emerged from the reflections, screaming silently, their mouths opening and closing as if begging for release. Mara stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. At the center of the hall, a staircase spiraled downward, carved from the same black stone, leading into a darkness that seemed to stretch into eternity. From below came a faint glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. She knew instinctively that whatever she sought, the truth, the source of the whispers, the way out lay at the bottom. Step by step, she descended. Each movement was accompanied by a chorus of whispers, rising and falling in a rhythm that matched her own pulse. Shapes moved along the walls, dark silhouettes shifting, forming twisted versions of people she once knew. Friends, neighbors, strangers, some smiling, some screaming, but all with eyes hollow and endless. You cannot leave, sleep, or stay forever. We are hungry. The hum grew louder, vibrating through her chest. Shadows began to detach from the walls, floating toward her in slow, deliberate movements. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged. Her hands clutched the lantern, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure standing at the base of the stairs, a tall, gaunt silhouette, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, arms hanging too long at its sides. It moved as she moved, perfectly mirrored, but the shadows around it writhed independently, reaching toward her, whispering and screaming all at once. Mara stumbled, almost falling, but the lantern's glow seemed to pull her forward, a lifeline in the consuming darkness. At the bottom of the staircase, the hall opened into a cavernous chamber. The walls were lined with mirrors, hundreds of them, reflecting infinite versions of herself. Some faces smiled, others cried, and some were twisted into grotesque, unrecognizable forms. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, deep and resonant. This is the heart, the core, the soul of the house. Mara felt the floor beneath her pulse, as if she were standing on a living being. A cold wind blew through the chamber, carrying the scent of decay and long-forgotten memories. The lantern floated ahead, guiding her to the center, where a dark pool reflected the faint light. Ripples moved across its surface, forming images: her grandmother, the town of Greyhaven, shadows twisting into shapes of despair and hunger. From the pool, a hand emerged, thin and elongated, grasping toward her. She froze, paralyzed by fear. The whispers surged, overlapping, forming a chant she could barely comprehend. Join us, sleep, surrender, you are ours. Mara's mind raced. She wanted to run, to escape, to break free from the suffocating darkness. But the room itself seemed to resist. The mirrors reflected not only her fear, but multiplied it, showing visions of herself trapped forever in the house, merging with the shadows, becoming one with the whispers. Desperation clawed at her chest. She swung the lantern toward the pool. The light flared, illuminating the figure emerging fully from the water. A twisted version of her grandmother, eyes black and hollow, mouth stretched in a silent scream. Mara, you came, just as we knew you would. The lantern flickered violently, and shadows surged from every mirror, forming hands that reached out to pull her toward the pool. The whispers became screams, voices overlapping, chanting, crying, laughing, a cacophony that threatened to shatter her mind. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into the darkness of the pool. Her hand reached toward the nearest mirror, and the surface rippled under her touch. The reflection that stared back was not her own. It was hollow-eyed, smiling, whispering, "Stay, join us, forever." The chamber trembled, as if the house itself were aware of her defiance. Shadows surged higher, forming walls of darkness that pressed in from all sides. The air grew colder, denser, and the pulsing beneath her feet quickened, matching the frantic rhythm of her heart. Mara realized she had only one chance: to escape the mirrors, the pool, the shadows, before they consumed her entirely. With a cry, she swung the lantern in a wide arc. The shadows shrieked, recoiling, and the mirrors cracked, splintering into fragments that floated midair before dissolving into darkness. The pool rippled violently, a scream emanating from its depths that shook Mara to her core. She turned and ran toward a faint opening at the far end of the chamber, the whispers clawing at her, trailing her like smoke, tugging at her mind. Each step was a battle against the darkness, but as she reached the opening, a hand shot from the shadows, grabbing her ankle. She screamed, yanked free, and stumbled through the passage into Part 4, the final whisper. Mara stumbled through the narrow passage, the shadows clawing at her heels. Every breath burned, every step threatened to send her tumbling into an abyss of darkness. The faint glow ahead promised freedom, yet a part of her mind screamed that the house had one final trap waiting. She emerged into a vast atrium, a place that seemed impossibly large, stretching far above and below into infinite darkness. The lantern floated in the center, its light casting long, wavering shadows. She realized with a sickening clarity: the house was alive, and it was testing her, gauging her fear, feeding on it. Whispers swirled around her, louder than ever, twisting into coherent, maddening sentences. "You cannot leave, you are ours, forever." Mara forced herself to move toward the lantern. With every step, the walls shifted and stretched, mirrors reflecting not her face, but dozens of hollow-eyed versions of herself, screaming silently, mouths opening in eternal torment. The air pulsed, the low hum vibrating in her chest, threatening to tear her mind apart. From the shadows emerged figures she thought she had escaped. Her grandmother, neighbors, strangers, all with eyes dark and empty. Their mouths whispered her name, calling her to surrender. Mara's heart pounded, terror clawing at her sanity. Yet she pressed forward, trembling but determined. As she approached the lantern, the shadows surged, forming hands, tendrils, and faces that reached out, desperate to pull her back. The whispers merged into a deafening roar. "You belong to us. You cannot leave." With every ounce of strength, Mara grabbed the lantern. Its glow flared, blinding, and for a moment, the shadows recoiled, hissing like snakes. The house shuddered violently, walls twisting, floors rippling, as if it were alive and angry. The mirrors shattered completely, releasing 1,000 tiny shrieks that pierced her mind. The light from the lantern revealed a doorway behind her, faint and trembling. It was small, unassuming, but it was her only chance. She ran, diving through the doorway just as the shadows lunged, screaming in rage. Behind her, the house roared, walls folding inward, mirrors exploding, the floor splitting open into a void that threatened to swallow everything. She landed hard on cold stone. For a moment, she couldn't move, heart hammering, lungs burning. The room was silent, save for a faint, almost mocking whisper that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. "You cannot escape." Mara scrambled to her feet and ran blindly, the lantern bobbing before her. The corridor twisted in ways that defied logic, staircases folding into ceilings, doors leading to walls, and the shadows still whispering, just out of reach, but never gone. She understood, with a bone-deep chill, that the house had no intention of letting her leave unchanged if she left at all. Finally, she reached a stairwell leading upward. It spiraled endlessly, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent house. The whispers followed, persistent and patient, clawing at her mind, whispering her fears aloud. "We see you, we hear you, we are waiting." She stumbled out of the stairwell into a small room that felt impossibly normal. The air was warm, familiar. Sunlight poured in through a cracked window. The lantern lay on the floor, extinguished, as if it had never existed. Mara collapsed, shaking, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, she thought it was over, that she had escaped the house. But then she heard it. A whisper, soft, almost playful, coming from the corner of the room, barely audible. "You left, but we are with you now, always." Her heart froze. Mara looked around, but the room was empty. Yet the shadows lingered in the corners of her vision, never fully leaving, stretching and curling just beyond perception. She realized, with a sinking dread, that some part of the house had followed her. Its whispers would haunt her dreams, its darkness would wait for the night, and one day it would return to claim her fully. Exhausted and trembling, Mara curled into herself on the floor. Her eyelids grew heavy, the lingering shadows pressing closer, whispering ever so softly. And as sleep finally took her, the last thought to cross her mind was that the house was patient and it would wait. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories to fall asleep to.